Hi guys, we're going to start a drawing exercise that will become a three-dimensional model, and it's based upon these buildings in Amsterdam. This idea came from the arty teacher. She has a website and social media accounts, and there's lots of fun arty ideas to try out. So we do have variations on this worksheet with different tall buildings, but this one is the Amsterdam sheet, and you may pick a different one, which is absolutely fine, and you can apply the same theory. The first thing is we're going to analyse the reference material, and that's what we do most of the time when we are working from a source picture. So in this case, we're analysing the structure. So if I focus on this particular building, as it's the largest, it's got a ground floor. It's actually got a basement level, which I'm going to miss out. And it's got 1, 2, 3 floors, which are all about the same height. And then it's got an attic room. Now, the windows are in a grid arrangement. So I'm going to take a piece of tracing paper to illustrate this. So if I draw a line here, and I'm drawing some lines over the top of those windows. Now I'm freehanding this, it's quite small scale. And we move that to one side and we look at that, we can see these are the windows and they are in this very regular arrangement. There's not a window here and a window there and a window here. There are buildings that do have windows that are a little bit like this. These are fairly standard. Now you might look at the reference material and think, these windows are different sizes. You're absolutely correct, but they are still in this grid arrangement. If you think about the position of the door, the height of the door in relation to the other elements. So the door is obviously for somebody to walk through, so you need to consider the height of the door and the shape of the roof line. Now here, these buildings are at a slight angle to us and moving away, so we can see the profile as it's receding. We're not going to incorporate that in our drawing. I'm just going to get the tracing paper back, pop it on top, and notice I'm just tracing some roofline shapes to make a point. I'm not going to trace these onto my work because I'm going to design my own. But if I pop those there, you can see these two quite different roofline shapes. And if we look into the other reference material, there's one with like a chimney feature. I don't think it is a chimney, but there's different configurations. So we're going to start developing our design and we're going to really focus on column A. This is going to become the profile of the building as you fold it up into a little model. In effect, it's going to be a net. So I have a ruler, but we could use a strip of cardboard that's cut as parallel lines. I'm not using it to measure, I'm using it for parallel lines. Now, the ground floor, if agreed, on some of these is a little bit larger than some of the subsequent floors. So I'm going to position my ruler, trying to create that roughly parallel with the baseline, and draw a light line. Remember, it's an underdrawing, so we are drawing light lines. We are not pressing hard. We're not making a commitment, we're doing our working out. My additional floors, I'm going to make them slightly smaller but consistent. So I'm going to use the ruler now as a parallel line. I'm lining it up with the one I've previously drawn and I'm popping it in. Might put an additional floor on there and then sort out the roof line thereafter. So that will do the job. So into the first floor, or the ground floor, I'm going to put a door. I'm looking at the different reference material to get some ideas. I'm going to draw a line parallel with the edge. Now that door looks quite large. I'm going to pop 2 windows here. It looks like I'm drawing 1. But I'm going to divide it into 2. I'm going to reduce the height of that door so it's not coming up to the top of the floor. I might put a window at the top of it, one of these type windows. And I might put some steps up to the door. So if I look at these steps for some reference material to inform my work, pop some steps in. Now, onto the first floor, I'm going to use this line here, and I can see a similar line occurring in lots of these. So I'm going to draw up my grid coming up. Notice the whole drawing is incredibly light. I'm going to position the middle one. The line is freehand. I'm not using a ruler because I'm going to make sure that it's got the personality of the buildings. You might think a building doesn't have personality, but it has a certain style and charm about it. So within this block, I'm drawing consistent lines. I'm giving the same depth there and there. I'm thinking if you were in this room, you were stood on the floor level about here. So that will make sense to me. So I'm thinking about the actual building. I'm not just throwing down windows any old where. I shall have 3 floors or 4 floors and build a roof line into here. Why not? Let's have 4 floors. So I've gone on to think about the different profiles of the building. This is the front, the street view, and the house is on Amsterdam, back onto the water. And you'll see on some of them, you can't see easily from this viewpoint, these winches where goods were taken off boats and put onto the ground floor into the buildings and then taken into the buildings. So what I've considered, if this is the front elevation, I'm going to write front on it to remind me, and this is the back. So this is the waterside view. And so I've created, based on this, one of these areas like a warehouse almost. Some of these features a bit like this on the Victorian Mills in Manchester and on the canal facade. So I'm going to think about the similar structure to the windows. So I've drawn my lines coming across from this view. I'm going to pop in similar number of windows on the other floors. Remember, I can draw it as a continuous line, but I'm becoming a little bit more confident now in my drawing as I'm getting used to this. Remember, I'm drawing very, very lightly as it is an underdrawing. I'm going to pop all the detail in later because I'm working things out. So if this is the front and that is the back, these are the side views. Now, quite clearly, these are terrace houses, so there wouldn't be a side elevation with any detail on. There would just be walls between the additional buildings. But because we're creating a model, we are going to create a side view. So I'm going to just take the lines across the height of the window. You could say you could draw the line all the way across, you certainly could. But I'm only going to have 2 windows on this profile. So again, I've drawn 2 at the bottom, and I'm going to just use my guidelines to sketch in the position. So I would sketch in the full building, and then I'm going to think about the roof line. Now the roof line's a fun part and quite creative. It needs a centre point. So on these 2 profiles, I'm just going to do a little centre line. Looks a bit like an antenna or an aerial, but that's just a little centre line to help me with my design. So I quite like this fancy feature here rather than a plain roof line. So I might go for something like this. I'm going to think about it, what I'm going to have on the street side and what I'm going to have on the canal side. So on the street side, I'm going to adopt something very similar to this. I'm going to put a little block. You think it's got a rectangle construction. It's then got an arc at the top. You might not feel confident freehanding straight away, but roll with it and see where you get to. These lines come down and curve. This is mirror symmetry, so I'm trying to do one and then the other. It's got kind of a little rounded feature on the side there. It's got a little winch there, even though it's the street side, it's still got the little winch point. I can see it here. And then there's a little window. I quite like the little window, it's quite cute. I'm going to whack in a little window there. So I would expect it to have a similar style. It wouldn't be completely different because the architects and the people that made these buildings would be the same. So you wouldn't have something really different unless it had been modernised. This one looks like it's been modernised on the back. So I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to start off with a little block. But I might put a little variation into it. So I'm going to try something a bit different. I'm going to do something a bit more like this. I've made that wide, I'm going to make it narrow again. I'm going to have the winch feature. I'm going to have a little round window here. Looking at these circles on there. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a change over here. This is why the underdrawing being light is useful, so you can make these changes. Remember mirror symmetry. And on the side profile, I might have something quite plain. Now we know there is a pitched roof on this building, and by a pitched roof I mean a triangular structure roof. We're not going to draw that into this because it would be confusing when we construct the model. We may add features like that later on. You could draw a flat roof into here that we will connect to there, but I'll think about that as I go forward. At this stage I have a framework in which I'm going to add detail. Obviously I've got to finish column D because I'm just demonstrating. So we're going to move on to the next stage. So what I've done is I've filled out much more detail and information onto my front facade of this building, this front elevation. And I'm going to look back now, and I'm going to look at the reference material and consider which areas are black and which areas are white. Now this is important. Look at the windows. People often leave the window pane white and draw a black line across it, but if you actually look at them, it's the reverse. These ones have got blinds behind them, so in that case there is the reverse, but on these ones we're going to focus on this style moving forward. So I'm going to turn my work around to a convenient angle, and I'm going to start filling in a section. Now into this window, this is a black section, so using a fine liner, notice I've drawn the edge before I colour in the middle. It's going to take a bit of time to do this drawing. I'm keeping that regular grid format. And carefully working into it. If the lines look a little bit messy, I can just go back and I can tidy up. If you've lost the point on your fine liner, it's become snapped, speak to the teacher and we will change your fine liner for you. I have different fine liners that I use at different times, but in the classroom we'll tend to use one each. So the outer area of around the window frame, I'm just going to treat with a nice single line. Notice I am freehand drawing, so they will be a little bit wonky. It's not going to be at absolute precision, but this is an old building. It is not a skyscraper, a modern skyscraper where everything's made of steel and glass. It's got a little bit of variation about it, which is going to make it quite fun to draw. So there I finished a window and I've drawn some window sills. So I would continue working into the building just like this, thinking about each section. Remember to look at the window you've just drawn so you're consistent in your application. Now I'm going to move on to a different section. So up at the top here, it's quite different. I'm not going to think about the brickwork and the surface of the building just at the moment. I'm going to think about the detail. So this section is going to be the same finish as the main body of the building, but this is the bit that's the ornate section that I'm going to handle in a different way. So I'm drawing a line around it using my work from earlier to guide me, my underdrawing. I have added a little bit more detail to the underdrawing from before, but not too much. So I'm going to look at these shapes. Remember mirror symmetry, so I've drawn a line there. It's quite hard to draw a mirror line. If you really struggle, we can use a piece of tracing paper. So I'm going to draw a fancy shape on the end of it. It's a bit like a letter P, but obviously this one would be in reverse. A bit like a letter Q. I'm going to draw a little parallel line into there. Now some of this I can make up as I go along. If you're not confident, I suggest you drawing a pencil first of all. See, I'm drawing quite fine lines. Now you can get much finer fine liners than this one. This is fairly standard. I've got one right here to show you. So in your own pencil case, you might have some additional pens that you want to use. But imagine doing a large drawing with a pen this size. It may be a little bit too fiddly for the drawing. See that line? It's slightly smaller than the previous one. I'm going to look back at the reference material and there's additional features in there, so I'm adding them in. Now I personally wouldn't do much drawing with this pen on this particular piece of work. I think it is a little bit too fiddly for what I'm trying to do. So whatever I draw at this side, I go and do the same at the other side. I'm thinking mirror symmetry all the time. So I'm working it out and designing and drawing. I'm going to extend that line into there. I'm going to add a small line into here. And I will still keep working into that section. Remember, I've popped a round window into here. I'm going to think about how to handle that. I'm going to have the white window frame as I do with these windows, and that section, because it's the glass bit, I'm going to pop some dark tone into there. Now these are very, very small. We could look at some additional reference material if you wanted to know what was going on in there. I'm going to make it up. Mirror symmetry, I keep saying it, but if you draw one and then draw the other, it's much, much easier than if you leave it and do it later. I see there's like a finial on the front there. I quite like that. I'm going to add an additional feature at the top. So I'm quite happy with that section. So you'll see that I've done a little bit more work into these windows. If they're not quite level, you can still keep making adjustments to them and finishing them off. In a larger area, if you have one, you might pick up a slightly larger pen to do your filling in, rather than using your teeny fine liners to do a large job. But always think about the scale of the material you're using and the surface you're trying to cover and the accuracy you require. I often say you wouldn't use a toothbrush to sweep the floor in your classroom, so you need to pick the scale and piece of equipment appropriately. Now I'm going to think about the surface of the building. You might think I'm just going to leave it white, but I really do think it would look better if we filled it in or added some texture. Now I'm going for texture to show you the ultimate, and I'm going for like a little horizontal line which will be suggestive of bricks. Now the density and distribution of these marks will have to be fairly even to make this look good. You could do little dots, but if you think about how long it's going to take you with just dots alone, it would take quite a long time. So notice I'm building up very carefully and consistently. I'm not just going to whack a few at a different pace across here. I'm going to be consistent. This is the kind of job it's quite nice to have an earphone in and be listening to some music or a podcast or an audio book or something, because it doesn't require a great deal of concentration. It just requires a little bit of rhythm. Now obviously it's a commitment. If you're not sure you want to do it, what we can do is we can photocopy your work, or if you're at home you can scan it in, do a printout and then do a trial on something that isn't the final piece, so you're not taking the risk. Now I'm quite happy with the way it's going, and I'm making a commitment to it straight away. You don't need to see me draw the whole thing, but you get the idea. So as you're drawing, you might come across problems or something goes wrong, and what I don't want you to do is scrap your work. You need to speak to your teacher and check in, and we'll look at how to incorporate it into your design or use a way of correcting something. There are white pens that are quite good. This one's a gel pen and this one's a paint pen. There's lots of different kinds of these. This one's actually run out, or I'd show you and demonstrate it, but I could add a little window or detail onto this door, or little dots. Like I say, that one's not working. This one's a little bit chunky. Because it's a paint pen, you have to shake it. And I do a little test to check it's working on something before I use it. You see, I'm just adding a few little dots and details. But there where that line doesn't look like it's standing out, can use the pen. So don't in any case think you're going to throw something out because it's not perfect. Remember, we are using these buildings that have this personality and age, so we can adapt. And definitely speak to your teacher about how to make features of things that don't work out. There is always a solution. Finding solutions is good. So I've finished the first face of the building. It's taken a little bit of time to do it, but I feel quite happy with it. While there are imperfections, it works with the style of the building. I'm going to handle the back in the same way with this brick texture, but I might go for a solid fill, or what we call at school a negative space fill, into the side panels to speed things up. I'm going to have a little think about it as I go along. It takes time. You are going to have to work hard and invest and work carefully. You are developing your drawing skills, and like anything, it takes hard work and effort. Good luck.